As we draw to the end of this most unusual of Easter days, I want us to go on a journey to that day when Jesus rose. Apparently, during the day, there had been rumors about something that had happened, but to a degree, all that they had to go on was that there was an empty tomb. In Luke's Gospel, we're told that the women came to report that the tomb was empty. But they had encountered two men who gleamed like lightning and had sent them a riddle. Why do you seek the living among the dead? He is not here, he has risen. On this, Luke says, Peter went to the tomb, saw the linen, but no Jesus, and went away, wondering what had happened. Luke reminds us that they had all been told that this would happen. The Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men, crucified, and on the third day be raised again. The women remembered the words when they were told them, but it does not seem that Peter was yet able to make the leap. Luke's story then introduces us to Cleopas and his companion, walking from Jerusalem to Emmaus, a journey of about 7 miles. It would probably have taken them about 3 hours to cover that distance. As far as we know, we have not met either of these people before. It seems that they were followers of Jesus, and it says they were talking about everything that had happened. They clearly knew what they were talking about and what they believed with regard to Jesus. They had hoped that he would be the one who would redeem Israel. These were not just a couple of people who were following because of the healings and the miracles. They had bought into an idea. This was it. The Romans would be ousted. Israel would be back in its rightful place, perhaps where it had been 200 years or so before in the time of the Maccabees. Or even better, a return to the days of David. Or perhaps, but they may not have even dared to hope for this, the coming of the Messianic kingdom, where the present age had passed into the age to come, and all would be well under the rule of God. Each household would have its own vine and fig tree, just as had been promised. These hopes had all been smashed by the Jewish authorities. They had come, Cleopas might have said, as they always did, and killed the prophet. Now it was all over. But yet there was this strange rumor put about by some of the women that Jesus was alive. And some of their companions had gone to the tomb. And it was as the women had said. Yet they didn't see Jesus. Cleopas and his companion are clearly at a loss. There is no sense in which they don't believe the women. It seems that they just don't know what to make of it. But Jesus, who is walking with them on the road, cuts them no slack. This person who they see as a stranger tells them straight off the bat that they are foolish and slow of heart. They should have known that the Messiah had to suffer these things and then enter into his glory. He then goes through all the scriptures, beginning with Moses and the prophets, telling them what is taught about himself. By now it's becoming dark, and they invite this stranger, as would have been the custom, to stay with them. At the table he breaks the bread for supper, and they're able to recognize him, at which point he's no longer there. We don't know how they came to know it was Jesus, but they're convinced enough to leave everything and rush back to Jerusalem in the dark to confirm what the women had said earlier. Yet while they're still getting their story out, Jesus arrives to confirm their words. He stands among the disciples and says, "Peace be with you." The disciples are startled. But Jesus reassures them that he is not a ghost, but he has risen in flesh and bones. And to prove it, he eats fish in their presence. Then he confirms what he had told them, and it is now fulfilled. As the encounter with the risen Jesus comes to an end in Luke's Gospel, he points them forward. The good news is to be preached to all peoples, and it is these gathered here, who are to do it, because they have, as Jesus says, been witness to all these things. They have heard the teaching, seen the miracles, been with him on the road. They've traveled through his passion, seen him die, and been fearful for themselves. And now he has returned. And this is the good news. The story they are to tell is the story of redemption, of a God whose plans and purposes for his creation are eternal and will stop at nothing, even death on a cross, to reveal those plans to his beloved. This is the message that we still have. And this year, perhaps it's even more important. We are all living in Good Friday as we face COVID-19. It's not the first time that humanity has been brought to this place by an infection. The most recent memory is the flu pandemic of the years after the First World War. But there have been others. In the early 1660s, plague swept across parts of Europe, and in Britain the epicenter was in London. It was the days when the wool trade was the driver of the English economy. A load of fleeces was sent to the small Derbyshire village of Eyam, and it soon became clear that it was infected as people began to become ill and die. The villagers faced a terrible decision. Should they carry on as normal and possibly spread the disease, or close themselves in to the village? Led by the rector, they isolated, and many died. Today you can go into the church to see their names. When I was at elementary school, we were told this story. And in those far-off days, I could not have imagined a world where such a thing happened. It was brought back to me by a news item I read recently, where the present rector of Eyam was interviewed, and he said, "I'm constantly asking myself how I measure up to my predecessor." The story of Eyam follows the example of Jesus. It is one of self-sacrifice for others, a story where the gospel is lived in the light of the resurrection hope. In a sense, those villagers of long ago were Easter people, seeing the hope beyond the horizon, knowing that Christ is risen. Alleluia.